And I just wanted to commend John and Chris and the Robertson Properties Group folks for really reaching out to everybody, trying to work through some of the issues. And I hope tonight we're going to see the unveiling of the revised plan that hopefully addresses some of the concerns. This by no means is the end. There's a long process that we need to go through in the City Council to actually approve this project. So really you're coming in at the beginning, which is really good. When it gets to the point of the Robertson Properties Group requesting a zoning change that will come through the City Council for approval. So that's when the formal process begins. You will have opportunity to testify several times at the hearings in the City Council. So that's the formal process you have looking forward, going forward. But I really wanted to thank again John and Chris for, I think, going beyond the call of duty to work with the community. I know they've had many, many meetings, and they will have many, many more meetings with the community. And certainly, I'm always available to hear your concerns also. So again, thank you very much for being here. John?
I'd like to also acknowledge some state legislators who are here in the audience tonight. If they can stand. Kathy Bryant, who is going to talk about the framework of tonight's meeting.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for coming. My name is Kathy Bryant. I'm not part of the project team. I've been asked to help facilitate the community meetings to make sure that we do a good job of listening to the community and making sure that the developers hear your thoughts. And we do that in a respectful and efficient way so that we're using your time as wisely as possible. We do have about a 30 to 40 minute presentation updating the community on the new plan. You're going to get a chance to see it. And then because it is a large group tonight, what we thought we'd do is we're going to break out into some smaller discussion groups. Each discussion group will have a facilitator from the project team so that all of you have an opportunity to give us your input about what you've seen and what you like and what you don't like and what you'd like to see as the project goes forward. And then we'll come back and hear a little bit of the comments that were heard in each one of the discussion groups. We hope that format allows all of you an opportunity to participate in the conversation and that we do it in a way that 100 people can have a conversation at the same time instead of going one at a time, which might take a lot longer. So again, we say thank you for coming. I'm going to turn it over so that you can get right to the presentation. We do have some handouts that we'll be giving out after the presentation so that you have some information to take home with you. So if you get some good ideas later, you'll have a means of getting involved. And then lastly, just a reminder, this is not a formal meeting. As council members said, this is the beginning of a process. This is an informal community meeting so that you're getting the information. We know you're seeing it for the first time. Wouldn't be fair to make this a formal type of hearing because you're just getting the information. So you'll have opportunity to see it, talk about it, and then as those more formal processes come up down the road, you'll see when all those dates and opportunities come about in the future. So again, thank you very much. I'm going to turn it back over to John for the presentation.
Parent company, portfolio company called Decurion Corporation, and this is just a little family tree that shows Consolidated Theaters, Pacific Theaters, ArcLight Cinemas. Like the company started over almost 65, 70 years ago in the theater business. And the Robertson Properties Group is the real estate development and investment arm for that company. And we've certainly been involved in many projects in the Hawaii area. If you are familiar with discussion, permits 1.5 to 2 million square feet of development. This is the plan that you all are familiar with if you've been to our past meetings. I think the big breakthrough was when we decided to put a main street along our property which connected the proposed signals at Moanalua Road and Kananoi Street on the bottom. But the big thing that had a reaction from everybody was the, I'm really striking out on technology. Had the 3 large residential buildings. They were fat residential buildings. You can see from their footprint, floor plan. They were each 350 feet tall, and certainly when we presented this back last April and May, there was a big reaction from the community at that conceptual level. We also had residential on top of the retail of Main Street, so in effect we had 5 residential buildings. These were more low to mid-rise. They were about 60, 80 to 100 feet in height, but all the density was in these 3 large towers along the bottom side of our property, where elevation changes. This elevation from this point down to Connoy Street is almost a 70-foot drop. So for us, during that entire time, we've been trying to figure out how the best way to filter the information that we were receiving. And we had already made a mission statement that we wanted to create a place, not a project. And we began the community dialogue and outreach. I see a lot of familiar faces in the audience, so I know many of you have been to our prior meetings, and I appreciate you coming again tonight. We also considered the planning initiatives, the studies that have been done to date. There's about 5 key ones over the last 10 years that set some policy objectives and planning objectives for this area, including our property. And finally, we embarked on a draft environmental impact statement. Many of you were at our May meeting where we did the pre-notice that EIS is in the works right now and is one of the reasons that we're meeting tonight. At last count, it's interesting, we've had over 100 outreach meetings that includes not only the IEA neighborhood boards, community associations, policy makers, but other professional and community groups. And from those meetings and from those dialogues, we identified a lot of different issues. I mean, there was a countless load of issues, but there were some key ones that kept coming up often and more times than not. Traffic and congestion was a concern. It exists today. We know that the swap meet operation is a big part of that. We've tried to improve a little bit of that with some of the rearrangements we've done with the entrances and exits, but it's still an issue, and you have it both on H1 as well as Kamehameha Highway. The other concern was the proposal of the kind of project that we were proposing, which had building heights, and as a result resulted in some view obstructions. And the third bullet comes with, when you start talking about density, it comes with the idea that you're going to put more square footage on the property. And then there was a concern about infrastructure capacity, and that's a fancy word for all kinds of services. It could be schools, it's water, it's fire, it's police protection, it's storm drains. All those things had to be considered as well when you think about putting a brand new community at this site. At the same time, we did hear some feedback, positive feedback, about some of the community benefits that this project could bring. And it was the need for a new supermarket, more neighborhood-oriented shops and stores and restaurants there for an area that was underserved. There was also a discussion about public gathering spaces, and something that's been a goal from all the planning initiatives that have come to pass over the last 5 to 10 years. New housing, affordable as well as workforce housing, we'll talk more about that. And finally, a walkable community and the pedestrian focus. And I say finally because the last bullet point is a no-brainer, that a project like this brings jobs, in both not only construction jobs but permanent jobs from the project that's ultimately built here. These are the planning initiatives that we use as references. I'm not going to go through them, but they're all public record. We're done both with the community input as well as from a policy level through the planning department at the city. And the big themes that come out of those plans, and surprisingly, is they established a Pearl Harbor Regional Town Center. And our property is within that area. And the goal for the Pearl Harbor Regional Town Center was encouraging mixed use, encouraging higher density, encouraging choices of housing, encouraging a public and pedestrian orientation. So again, we feel our project meets those kind of objectives, and we certainly wanted to follow what the theme was of those planning initiatives. Our Hawaii project team, we talk about a village. It takes a village to do a project like this, and we were really blessed to have all Hawaii consultants, very top in their areas of expertise, that have helped us in all the planning efforts, the architectural efforts, engineering efforts, and we're just really pleased that we were able to have all these different individuals here in Hawaii work on our project. We presented this at the EIS pre-notice meeting, the technical studies that had been identified that were important to cover. I'm not going to read these because we really want to get to the dialogue portion of our meeting, but I just want to point out that as part of the main meeting, we added 3 that are not required as part of an EIS, but were concerns that were raised by community residents. The idea of having a trade wind analysis, shadow study, and additional view analysis from the adjacent properties, particularly Lele, Pono, and Pearlridge, and so forth. Now, we're going to be meeting with Lele, Pono, and Pearlridge. We're also meeting with St. Timothy's and Harbor Point because they're immediate stakeholders in our project. So this is a wider group meeting, and then we want to do specific meetings because they've got very specific issues and concerns. The EIS talks about regional impact. We really wanted to get to the property owner issue of what impacts are we causing from the residential buildings that we were proposing. As part of the EIS, we're required to look at alternative options for the property. And hopefully from all the meetings I've had, I've reinforced the fact that this property is not going to stay a swap meet operation forever. When we bought it, the underwriting that we did for the property was to acquire it to build commercial. So this is a ultimate plan. You could look at it as a retail focus. It could be considered an expansion of the mall. There's many tenants looking for an area to locate, larger tenants who would love to be across the street from the second largest mall on the island. And this project is about 1.5 million square feet, over 6,000 parking stalls. It was analyzed in the traffic report. And it's interesting to see that during the evening, 20% more traffic on the local roads, and certainly on the weekends, because of the nature of the kind of development it is, it's almost 40% more traffic. Now, this kind of development is regional focused. It's bringing people from outside because you're clearly bringing tenants that would be of interest for people, for shoppers, and has much more of an outside orientation than being something just for the IDA community. Again, an example of what a project like this could be. That's the 60-foot height limit under a current B2 zoning, and you'd have to respect certain setbacks, but you could build the project fairly close to the street. Another alternative would be more of an office focus. This could be professional office, could be medical office, it could be public offices, all sorts of schemes here, and that optimum project, again, under the current zoning, would allow 1.3 million square feet, 4,400 cars, and it has a much more dramatic impact on traffic. Morning traffic doubles what our project as a mixed use would create, and in the evening, about 50% more traffic. And again, a visual of what that kind of project could possibly look like on this site. This is our new master plan, and I want to kind of start with the big context so you can see the surrounding areas. We've laid our plan on top of the aerial. This is Waianae Road, this is Connoy Street going down to Kamehameha Highway. This is representing a future transit route. That's the proposed transit stop. Westridge Shopping Center, Harbor Point, St. Timothy's. Here's the school that we're having our meeting, Lele, Pono, Pearlridge on the corner, the large mall, regional mall, Pearlridge Mall, and Samita Farms. And this is the project that we're now proposing, and we'll get into a little bit more detail about. Again, as we addressed where we've been and where we now are, we wanted to make sure that as we looked at this plan, we filtered it to these concerns. Well, what were the issues that the community brought up, and how can we best address them? So the plan has not changed from the standpoint of having the Main Street component, but what we've done is make sure that this Main Street is straightened out a little bit longer so that we can deal with the slope issues, but more importantly, carry the capacity of traffic. This is going to be essentially a private road, but it'll be publicly accessible, where there's no restrictions on the public using it. As part of this roadway network, we wanted to make sure that we made all the connections that were appropriate in terms of the signals lining up with the Pearlridge Park, with the Pearlridge Mall. We've got other curb cuts here, which is where we have now the entrance to our subterranean parking and where the loading and service uses go. We wanted to make sure there were no service or loading activities that would be outside of a structure that would in any way create any kind of visual or negative acoustical noise impact. The big thing that we did was try to line up and reduce the size of the towers. If we'll be able to go back and forth on some of these, but the key thing was we took these fat buildings and we reduced them almost in half. As a result, we had to drop our unit count from 1,800 units to 1,500 units. But it was real important for us to slim them up. We made sure that this particular unit, which was maybe 50 or 60 feet away from Harbor Point, got set back almost 100 to 120 feet. And we began to play with the variable height. So on a plan standpoint, this is still a 350-foot tall building, but it's much slimmer. This is a 300-foot building. This is a 250-foot building, and these are two 150-foot buildings. And again, when I say 150 feet, that's not all residential. These are all sitting on top of a combination of either other retail. Certainly on Main Street, you've got shops underneath this as well as parking. This one has parking primarily, and this has got both parking and retail, and it's inclusive of all those levels. So again, if maybe go back and forth, this is the plan. You can see the situation, you can see how close this building was to the property line. You can tell we were looking at a lot more building size in terms of what we had here before. And what we've now done is we've distributed it into slimmer buildings. On this side, we still have 3 or 4 stories potentially above retail. This is the area that we've identified in the EIS for professional office. It could be medical office. We could also consider assisted living or senior citizen housing. And at our May meeting, we talked about the idea of a Kamina hotel. We see a need for suburban hotel. This is something not more than 120 to 150 units. I was proposing it from the standpoint of having out-of-town guests, friends visiting for Thanksgiving holiday, other business uses, and someone over the last few months even mentioned the fact that you have a lot of sports teams that come to the area, whether it's a soccer team or a softball team, and they have no place to stay. They've got to go back to a resort area, and there's nothing in the community for them. So with this kind of hotel, it's limited service. We're not putting in any fancy restaurants. There's no need to, because we've got a whole center that's built around that someone can come down the elevator and enjoy a walk through the project and be able to go have a cup of coffee or visit shop space. I want to make it clear that we included that in the EIS for disclosure purposes. Today, the BMX zoning that we're after doesn't even allow this type of hotel use. So we're just doing it to make sure it's covered in our analysis, and still need to do some work to make sure that we can get the zoning to allow that particular use to be permitted. A big part of listening to what you had to say was about traffic and how do we address the traffic issues. And we've done major road improvements. We've widened and added lanes. When I say we, that's the proposal with this master plan, to add lanes to Waianae and Pono streets. We've added 2 new signalized intersections that come with their own improved crosswalks. And basically, we've contributed over 9% of the project to this kind of dedicated public access. Next slide. What we've done is we try to visually portray what those improvements would look like. It's hard to read them in a plan, but you can see the road widenings, you can see the signalized intersections, you can see the right turn in, right turn out at the corner of our shopping center. You can see the protected right turn here. We've got entrances to the parking garage and the loading in this location. There's the signal down at the bottom where KFC is. As part of that work, we're trying to also correct the problem that we see with the KFC drive-through, which comes in at a very unusual diagonal in the street, and we're going to allow that to come through our property to correct that whole intersection, because right now it's not safe. What we then did is we wanted to show you as best we can our project superimposed on the real context. So these next series of slides are trying as real as possible to show what the project looks like in today's world and context. So this is the view looking up from the hills above H1 as well as Waianae Road. Our project there, you can see Pearlridge Square. Lele Pono is right behind it. Our project is right here to the right. Next slide. This is now from the Pearl Harbor side. And again, there's Pearlridge, Lele Pono to give you some context. Here's Waianae Street. That's Kamehameha Highway, Westridge Shopping Center, and that's our project located right in this location. And again, this is computer depictions as close as we can make them look realistic for the purposes of this presentation. Here's the view from Pearlridge Mall, looking up Waianae Street. Again, there's the 350-foot residential building, the 300-foot, there's the market. You can see a glimpse of the 250 and then the 150-foot residential buildings. This is the view from the intersection of Kaanohe and Waianae Road. And again, you're seeing how we've lined up the buildings, and most importantly that we try to stagger the heights of these buildings so that they're not just one monolithic height. And the buildings are also slimmer in terms of their profile. Again, that's depicted really well in this shot where you're seeing it above the park. This is Lele Pono, that's Waianae Road. Okay. So this is the project as we presented it to you many times over the last year and a half. Three 350-foot towers, very large building bases. They're fat buildings, 1,800 units. We had 5 or 6 stories of residential above commercial in this location. And we want to show you in contrast what we did to slim up these buildings, and this is now the project as we proposed it. It's still a high-density project, so for any of you that say, I don't want to see a high-density residential project, you know, that may be still a concern, but what we've tried to do is listen and see what we could do to deliver something that was still in keeping with what the planning objectives are, still allow for housing choices, and still create a very open feeling in terms of the retail area so that we can create a lot of walkable areas, pedestrian gathering places, plazas, and places where you can see outdoor seating and white sidewalks. Again, I think it's important again to look at the context of all of this immediate area from the standpoint of what the residential structures are doing from a height and density standpoint. And we did this comparison just so you can see the heights. Here's Pearlridge, Lele Pono. This is our highest building at 350. The darker colors are our buildings, and you're seeing it compared to the other residential buildings in this immediate area. We asked for a cross-section because what's misleading is when you talk about height, you're not looking about the topography. You know, where does a building sit on an elevation standpoint? And you know, clearly Lele Pono and even more importantly Pearlridge Square sit on a higher elevation in our property. As I said, Waianae Road drops 70 feet, and you can see the impact of how that changes the very heights of our building as we put the taller buildings down at the bottom part of our property. We were also asked to look at the view analysis in terms of the 3 key views that were public views. I think it was DPP who identified this with our architects, and they wanted to see what, from Blaisdell Park, Kaanohe Street, looking down the street, as well as the Rainbow Bay Marina, what happens to those important view corridors when our project is built. So this is Rainbow Bay Marina. This is the shot before, and there it is after, and we've depicted our project in that location. On Blaisdell Park, it was a little bit more interesting because when you go inside the park, you can't see anything because there's so many trees. So we asked our architect to go outside the park. So he took the project shot, or the view corridor shot from the highway. And here's our site, and this is with the buildings on it. And you can see what impacts it's done to any of the view, kind of important views that people see here. This one's very telling. From Kaanohe Street looking down, you get the glimpse of the water. Our project isn't shown here, obviously, but there you get a glimpse of it just beyond the vegetation to the right of Lele Pono. Again, you know, when we look at what the alternatives are, this project as a retail project and the next project as an office project represent what the current zoning allows. And on a project like this, there would be no requirement for public hearings, there would be no public meetings, although I would guarantee you still would be meeting with the board as a courtesy, but you could go right to the city and with traffic approvals, start processing for permits for a development like this. What we feel is that our project is a better project and it allows for what we consider to be a little bit more elegant layout of the towers, but also creating a much nicer open space which allows for the Main Street idea as well as the whole project where You know, on a Sunday or Saturday morning, you could do a farmer's market in this area and do things that would bring the community, create a walkable, sustainable community, which is what our objective has been. And these are, again, character shots that we've taken to try to represent kind of the feeling that we're after in terms of a development. It's like, what kind of retail would you like? What kind of stores are missing here that you would like? Next slide. And trying to represent our first rendering here. This is a view of Main Street just past Waianae as you come down the driveway at that signalized entrance. And how do you create a really neat area where people can come and just sit and watch? They can shop, they can have a cup of coffee, they can do their other neighborhood services and shopping experiences, and it's all convenient, and you don't need to get necessarily into a car to enjoy this. And again, what kinds of public spaces do you want? What kind of public gathering places do you like that would really enforce a sense of place and sense of community for Aiea? This is the rendering that shows the market, the surface parking, and just the quality that we're trying to project here from the standpoint of streetscape and lighting and landscaping and site furnishing, seating, and things of that nature. And then ultimately just making it a really fun place to hang out. This is, again, it's not meant to be a tourist area, it's not meant to be a resort, it's meant to be a town center for Aiea, for the community of Aiea, again reinforcing what the planning documents had hoped for, is creating a Pearl City, Pearl Harbor Regional Town Center, and this was one of the likely spots for something like that where you could bring all these wonderful aspects of a great livable, walkable community all together. And this is the view from the base of the three residential buildings. It's one of the larger gathering places. We have several. We're looking at about 1.5 acres of land within our project that are attributable to spaces like this. Even just the softscape area or the landscape area is 1/4 acre, so it's like a little pocket park. And this is the view, if you were looking at this juncture, Main Street takes you to Waianae Road here. This to the right is where, the market is located. If you made a right, you would be going down Cononoe Street to Cononoe Street. If you make a left, this is one of the roadways that we've included. We have yet to meet again with Harbor Point, but having an opportunity for them to be able to not have to drive all the way to Waianae Road and then come back in, but be able to be connected to our project, so it's a lot larger urban village than just our property. We don't want to turn our backs to St. Timothy's and Harbor Point. We want to figure out a way to include them. And for me, we talked about this. This is now an entrance to their residential area rather than coming in from that long driveway that is part of the church property. Tonight, after we break up into the groups, we have these fact sheets to provide you, so it's got some of the important information that we discussed tonight or presented tonight. The big ones, again, $2.3 billion of economic impact to the island of Oahu. We're talking about, I think that's a typo there, but it's over $770 million of private investment. We're talking about capital and private investment to build a project of this size. Clearly, it creates a lot of jobs, permanent jobs annually, which is about 950, and during the course of its build-out, which we expect to be 10 or 12 or 13 years, we're talking about over 980 jobs annually from that perspective. Just as an update, and again, tonight's meeting is really to do what we promised we were going to do, is that once we got the input and we felt we understood the direction we were going to take, is to present to you the master plan that we would like to go forward with. And that's what we're doing tonight. That master plan will now be fully evaluated, as it has been over the last couple of months, and it's one of the reasons we're a little bit behind schedule, but we're hoping to publish sometime in early December, the draft EIS. In typical situations, you'd have a 45-day public comment period. We've asked that that public comment period be extended to 60 days. We know that if it goes out during the holidays, the last thing people want to be doing is responding to an EIS. That draft EIS will be available at the public library. We'll have links to it online on our website. I'm pretty much sure that what I would like to do is make our immediate neighbors a copy available for their management offices, so Lele, Pono, Pearlridge, St. Timothy's and Harbor Point will get a copy that they can share and be able to review. Certainly the neighborhood board gets copies as well. And then tonight, we're taking some feedback, but the real idea is to make sure that all of you, if you're really interested, and I know you are, to read the draft EIS, to read the technical studies, to read the traffic study, and then have any comments put in written form to be sent to PBR, our EIS consultant, or the city. It's real important that the best way for your voice to be heard, if you've got more information that you feel needs to be evaluated, to do that in writing at that time. Tonight, nothing that's written is being put in that process, but it's all tied into this 60-day public comment period. And as a side note, many of you were kind enough to ask questions, leave a postcard with your address. Those are all being answered and will be part of this draft EIS, but I also believe that, those responses were mailed out to anybody who left an address, and hopefully you received them by now or will be getting them shortly. You said, good. So I just wanted to make sure that was the case. No one can read this slide. All I want to encourage you and make you understand is that besides you reviewing and commenting on our draft EIS, we've got federal agencies, state agencies, city and county elected officials, and certainly condominium and community organizations all being sent copies so that they can comment on it. So it's going to be a lot of people reviewing it to make sure that the report is complete. Very quick, EIS kind of status report. We were hoping to have this meeting sometime in August. It got pushed out till today. The community meeting, as I said, we're looking at the comment period starting sometime in the beginning of December, middle of December. We're asking for a 60-day comment period. At that point, our consultant will work with the city to take all the comments. If there's more studies that need to be done, make sure that those are done, and then putting it into final form. At that point, we're hoping that the EIS will be finalized and accepted, and that allows us to do the most important next step, which is start the zone change process. To date, everything we've done has been voluntary. We'll continue to have these kind of meetings where anybody wants to meet with us or have concerns. We will continue having these kind of community outreach meetings, but starting around spring and summer, we enter a much more formal process, and now you're into a public hearing process. That means there will be hearings in front of the Planning Commission, at the City Council. I'm sure that those appointed and elected officials will want to hear your input, and it will be your chance to continue providing that input at that elected officials level. And we're hoping through that process that we'll have our commission hearings, looks like not by the end of 2012, but early 2013, and that's our hope, that we'll be in a position where we can get the zone change approved. This is still a rough schedule, but we wanted to keep you aware. I know last time we had a really big neighborhood meeting a year ago, May. Everybody thought that summer I was going to start bulldozing the project. If everything goes well, we would not start construction until first or second quarter of 2014, and there's a lot of things that might push that schedule out. So that's, just quickly, our presentation for tonight, and I want to just conclude, there's a lot of people have asked me the question many times, well, why are you still pursuing this? Why don't you just leave well enough alone and stick to your B2 zoning and forget about the mixed use? And we really believe, and I see this lady nodding saying doing that, and it's not about money, sir, believe me, it's not money. This is a very expensive process for us, and the real reason is because we feel this is the more appropriate project. This is a project that is about IAEA. It's not bringing people from outside the area. It's not creating traffic concerns at the level a typical commercial or office project would do. And that's something we fervently believe, and we're now, again, as always, put our money where our mouth is as we proceed with all the studies and begin to take the next important step to go through the zone change. I look at the picture of a little girl blowing bubbles, looking forward, and to me it just brings up a saying I always remember about our children. I've got 3 sons. They can be a positive message to a future we'll never see. At the same time, when we look in their eyes, we want to make sure we did the right thing and that we protected their legacy, protected the natural environment, and made sure that we didn't allow, particularly in Oahu, for sprawl to occur, because when urban sprawl occurs, that's when country no longer is country. So for me, as I've gone through all of these studies and looked at the 2 years of effort here, I've really come to realize that Hawaii has always believed in smart growth communities, going back centuries, that the villages that they had, people were able to sustain for themselves, their extended families, and their communities, and that there's always been a stewardship here. So what we want to do is really reinforce that for IAEA. That's our hope, that's our objective, and we appreciate the fact that you still come out to these meetings. I know it's a busy night, you have families and you have other commitments, but I'm appreciative of the fact that you're participating with us on this development. So for that, I just want to extend to all of you a heartfelt mahalo, and I want to turn it back over to Kat.
Thank you. I know that was a lot to digest, and so we want to give you an opportunity to reflect on the information that you've seen and give us some feedback, what your reaction to the revised presentation is, thoughts you have, questions you might like answered, or things you'd like to see in the presentation the next time you're seeing this for the first time. I'm seeing it for the first time. So they want to know what you'd like to see in future presentations as well, if there's things that they can change. So what we'd like to do, we have presentation boards that have some of the highlights